Welcome to the From Guilt to Good podcast, where we discuss all the things caregivers wish people talked about, but don't, won't, or can't. Hi, my name is Jeanette Yates. And I'm a lifelong caregiver for my mom and the founder of The Self Caregiver, where I help caregivers feel good, not guilty. In this week's episode of From Guilt to Good, we are joined by Wynter Johnson. Wynter is the co-founder and president of Caily, which is a platform that helps you coordinate care for your whole family. Whether caring for aging parents, children with special needs, or loved ones with chronic conditions, organize healthy info, track routines, share updates, and keep everyone connected. That's what Caily is all about. Caily provides families with a simple way to stay connected, whether during an illness, aging, or a crisis. In our conversation today, we'll talk about why she and her co-founder started Caily and how their core values and circle of support ensures that every user has the tools they need for more connected and stress-free experience. Love all of that, Wynter.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Before we get into the specifics about Caily, I would love to just know more about your story, how Caily got started. And I read on the website it got started because you have your own personal caregiving experience. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me here. I'm excited to talk about Kaylee and how we can support caregivers. I'm very fortunate to be a part of Kaylee, and it's interesting. My co-founder and I, we had a unique opportunity to join together in business, and for about a year. We spent some time talking about what do we really want to do. And we explored everything from pet care to technology to software. We both have backgrounds in ed tech, specifically regulatory education, and working in kind of the SaaS business tech industry. And so we spent a lot of time exploring all these different industries and these different companies, and nothing was really kind of fitting what we were looking for. And then all of a sudden, one day, we're having this conversation. It's kind of candid and off the cuff. And I'm telling her the story about caring for my grandma. And so I was part of my grandmother's caregiving circle. To be honest, the experience was awful, and I was telling her how frustrating our experience was with, the hospitals and not being able to get information, and even sharing information with our own family was really, really complicated. My mom was her primary caregiver, but she was in Kansas, so she was about 4 hours from where we are, and so it was really hard to be involved in the day-to-day and know what was going on, and we were often getting inaccurate information, or we were missing information, or we weren't knowing when there were, test results or appointments, and it was just really frustrating. And I think the final straw for me was my grandma had been in the hospital for a week and we didn't know it. She had been moved from her care facility into the hospital. You call and you talk to them all the time and you think, maybe she's, doing her exercise class, or maybe she's with a friend, or, maybe we missed her and she's napping. And so it took a week for us to find out what was really going on. And the guilt that I will have from that, it's awful because you think, how could that experience have been better? How could we have cared for her differently? How could I have helped my mom more? How could my sister have been, how could we be more aligned? And so it kind of came from an off the cuff conversation, and we thought, wait, could we make a difference here? Is this something that we could make better? We could make easier. We can have an impact on. So we started doing research. We started looking at what was out there and found that there really is and was and is a gap in the market for apps and platforms that really bring everyone together to care for people who need care. And you think, how did you not know that your family member was in the hospital for a week? And we hear this story all the time, including from one of our own employees just last week. And so if I had had Kaylee, it would have been completely different.
But, my caregiving journey was really long and complicated, but I also have spoken with many caregivers over the years. And it's interesting, usually when a caregiver and I are talking, they're burnout, they're exhausted. And honestly, a lot of them feel like they don't have enough support. But even if they did have somebody that could help, it's like, oh, having to explain everything is going to be too like, I'd rather just not. It's almost like I used to be a teacher and it was like, is do you need a day off bad enough to deal with this, like telling the sub what to do or not?
Yeah.
I don't know. And so I think it's interesting that one of the things that I really noticed when I downloaded the Caily app and started checking it out was how there is everything there. So when, there is always a primary caregiver, right? There's always, and sometimes that you're the primary and the secondary and the tertiary. Other times you have other people that could step in, but it's really hard to get somebody to step in when they don't know what's going on. They haven't been in the loop. But when you have something like Caily, they are in the loop, even if they're not, there all the time in present day, so that you can be up to speed on what's going on. And so I really think that communication piece is so important, not just in like logistics, like where is somebody right now, which is very important, but also what happens if I need a break? How quick can somebody step in and help me without, me having to do all the legwork of training them on what's happening?
And you're spot on. I was also, when I was married, my husband had cancer and I was his primary caregiver. And when you talk about communication, you think, I just had to share the worst news ever. And now you want me to share it again and again and again.
Mhm.
And there's tools today. There's text messaging, but you have different groups, you have different family members, you have some who are involved, some who aren't. And so the app kind of centralizes all of that. But you really do have to think, is it easier to share and coordinate this, or is it easier just to do it by myself? And caregivers so often think it's just easier to do it by myself. And so part of this, including our ask for help feature, is really meant to make it easy to ask for help, because you don't want to be a burden. Even caregivers, they don't want to burden their loved ones. My mom really tried to make it easy for my sister and I. We had young kids and she didn't want to add more to our plates, but we wanted to help. We just didn't know how.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really great about Kaylee, and I think y'all are doing something with the platform that I want other companies who are serving the needs of caregivers and their families to think about, and y'all do it so well. Because when we're talking about a place to collect all of this information about our loved one's health, especially in the Kaylee app, because you have symptom tracking, a place to store documents, medications, things like that. That's personal and private. But one of the things that's very apparent on your website, it's easy to get to, is understanding how that Kaylee has already thought about the privacy of your loved one and has taken measures to make sure that that information is as safe as possible. Can you talk a little bit more about working through that process, and what are some of the things that you have in place in the platform that help families feel confident with their information that's in there?
Well, yeah, privacy and security are so important, especially when you're working with a team of caregivers or a circle of people who are helping care for your loved one. I mean, the core of the app has HIPAA aligned safeguards and real enterprise grade encryption. It's bank level security. So you don't have to worry about your information getting out there. It's safe within the app. But we have very, very strict permission controls. And what's really important to us is that you don't share information with people who you don't want to have it. And so when you're caring for someone, they may want one person to be able to see everything and the other person can only see health information. They aren't ready to share their financials or their wills or their power of attorneys, whatever that might look like. And so every portion of the app is customizable. And so you can set different permissions, allowing caregivers to see one part and not the other. It can be changed, it can be updated. And so that was really important with us because family dynamics can be complicated, what you're sharing, medical information. And so, us as caregivers, it was really, really important that not only the one who's being cared for, but caregivers have control over that and they can feel safe with it.
Yeah, I really, really appreciated that. I noticed when I was setting it up for myself that um, there, because I thought about like you mentioned, like different family members or whatever. You're like, they don't need to know all this nitty gritty. They just need the general idea. And then I also thought about that I had a paid caregiver that worked with us, and I would love for I would love to have had it to where she has access to what she needs, but doesn't have access to everything else. And so I really liked that Caily is something you can use just with family, but also with professional people as well. And like you said, you can set the permissions accordingly. I think that's so important. And I love how transparent y'all are with that on the website, where you go through, you're not tech nerding out on everybody, but you're just saying, hey, we've thought about this. We care about your privacy and your security and your confidence in knowing that we take this seriously. I think that goes a long way with building trust because caregivers are exhausted and um, nervous. And a lot of times we're control freaks and we want to make sure like we
Yes.
don't want to give up any control because it makes us nervous. But having the ability to use a tool where we can still maintain that control, I think is a game changer. And I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And it is important to us. And, it's for all different types of care. So sometimes care receivers are involved in their own care. Maybe, I know I have all of my information in the app and, God forbid something happens. I want to be able to pick and choose who can see what information. Or, if you're caring for a loved one who's unable to make those choices for themselves, that's just so important.
Was another thing that I was thinking about too when I first started using it. Because by the time I started using it, my mom was in hospice. There wasn't a need for me to put everything in there because I knew I wasn't going to need that for her. But I did start thinking about, it's interesting. I could start using this for myself now as a fully functional 50-year-old woman. And then as needed, I can add people to my my support team and like you say and have control over who sees what and all of that. So I think it is interesting, like I came at it from a caregiver perspective, but as I looked at it I was like it's actually just a good like family care app, like just in general.
It really is, and being part of it, I think I'm a type A person who's usually pretty prepared, but as we've gone through this, I've realized how unprepared I was, and if something were to happen to me, does my family know my medications? Do they know where I keep my documents? Do they know? And it's easy to think nothing's gonna happen, but you never know, and so, it's made me realize how unprepared I was and how I need to take steps to be prepared, if anything, just for my kids.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That is, so one of the things that I would love to have you share with us is just for people to get an idea of some of the ways that Caily has been helpful to people that use it. So for those of you who haven't seen the app before, we were talking before I hit record. It's more than an app, but for the simplicity purposes, you go to the app store, you download an app, and then you can begin building your care system within the app where you're adding documents, medications, you can do a daily check-in. There's different things like that. So that is, how it works. Can you tell us some ways that you've heard from people that are using the app or maybe you've experienced yourself where people have said like, oh, this made a difference for the care of our loved one, or this made a difference for my own care?
It's interesting. How have I experienced that myself? I love every time I meet up with my father-in-law right now because he'll show me something new that he's added to the app. And he'll be like, "Did you know this will track my blood pressure over time? Look at the graph." Or did you know I can add this or I can add this? Or I invited someone to my circle and to watch him add and explore and discover kind of what we can do has been a lot of fun for my own family. But thinking about, speaking of my own family, it's interesting. I've got, parents and step parents and in-laws and everyone is kind of aging and you're watching that happen and getting our own family prepared has been really interesting as part of this process. But it's been a lot of fun to watch people sign up and you'll see signups come in and you'll see an entire family sign up and they're setting up their circle and they're working together to care for their loved one. And that has been really impactful as we've moved forward to know that people aren't doing it alone. They're creating those care circles and that's really important. But probably the thing that I have heard most since we launched Caily is that it would have been nice if I had Caily when I was in the emergency room, when I was caring for my mom, when we were trying to figure out my son's care, whatever it might have been. There's so many situations where it would have been nice. And some of those are emergent situations, some of them are ongoing. And so many people have learned the value of getting ahead of it, staying ahead of it, like we talked about, getting that information there for yourself or your spouse, whatever that might be. But there's so many stories about I was unprepared and now I'm getting ready because of this. And I think that's one of the most it's just been really rewarding to know that we're making that difference and people are seeing how this can have an impact both short term and long term.
Not having good communication causes so many of the other problems that we experience as caregivers where you know you feel like you're constantly asking questions of your loved one they don't want to answer, um, or you're trying to uh, know, did they take their medicine, do they, like all this kind of stuff. And so I think at the end of the day, having a communication system provides the ability for the support to then come. So communication first and then the support second. So I really think that's a great benefit of it.
And you're absolutely right. Families don't want to talk about it. My grandma used to always tell me, "We'll talk about it later. We'll talk about that later." And later just never came. And it impacted her care. And I am, one of my goals is to not let that happen with my parents. I want to do better for them, be better for them, have it be a different experience. And so setting that up early is hard. My co-founder, her family meets once a year and they talk through all of this together. What has changed in the last year? And we were talking about how her family approached it differently than mine. And I would love if all families were on board and we knew every year what was going on or what had changed or what had updated, but also to have a platform that works with everyone. Some of our families on Apple and others are on Android. And so some of the features didn't work or they didn't cross over. And so finding a place for us that everyone used was really complicated. And it was part of the vision for this.
Yes, that is so true. Speaking of using it with your parents and in-laws and whatnot, that brings me to my next question or concern that I hear a lot, and I'm not worried about it. I just want to encourage people. So I want you to tell us. So you have your family members on there. How hard is it to get families to use the Caily app as far as like for those tech squeamish people that are like, ugh, either I don't want to, or, like my father in law will be like, ugh, you know, I don't know about any of that, kind of thing. What are some tips you can give us to like get our family members to perhaps use something like Kaylee and
Yeah. Yeah.
help us communicate?
It
How
can
can we
be
communicate?
Yeah, absolutely. It can feel intimidating at first to people who aren't really comfortable with technology day to day. And the thing we recommend is start with one piece of it. Kaylee can track your health information, your schedule, your circles, a lot of information in the vault. Start with one thing. And maybe it's just tracking medications. It's one place to go. It's one thing that everyone's getting on board with, everyone's getting comfortable with. And then maybe there's symptoms, or maybe it's the next thing. But if you try to do it all at once, it can feel overwhelming. And so starting with that one thing can definitely help. But I think for me, a couple things are, we've told our family this makes it easier for us. My parents are like, if it makes it easier for you guys, we're in. We don't want you to go through what we went through with our parents. And so explaining the value of it has been very, very helpful. But also, they're already doing this. They're logging into multiple healthcare providers. They're using multiple calendars. They've got sticky notes everywhere. They're already doing this and it's already complicated. And so the whole idea behind Kaylee is it makes it easier for them. And so if we can say, listen, you're already doing this, but now you only have to do it in one place, they've been a lot more likely to get on board and keep using it regularly, which is
Yeah,
which has been helpful and it's been incredibly helpful.
that is such a good point that I think we often, especially when we're thinking about our parents or our in-law, the generation older than us, it's like, oh, they stink it. They stink at technology. It's going to be hard. And it's going to be one more thing that I have to do. Really, they are like most of the people that are in on the bench for me potentially caring for them. So my in-laws, my my dad, things like that. It's like, well, they're using technology every day and they've learned how to use those things because they're important to them. So this is just another, when we can explain the value, the benefits, the importance, I think that goes a long way. They're capable in many cases, especially if you're getting them in early before you're having to take over all of the caregiving duties, right? Like when you're just trying to communicate better as a family, it's a lot easier to get them on board when they're still capable of, they're using their phone, they're using their remotes, they're using their, computers and all this kind of stuff. It's like, this is very similar. It's just another app you can use, where we can walk through it. And I do like the idea of starting with one thing. And I would say, like, whatever the thing that's getting on your nerves the most as a or the biggest problem, like, are they taking their medicine or not? Well, we're going to start with medication tracking, or, you know, do they, how are they doing on a day-to-day basis? We're going to start with symptom tracking. I think that's a great way to get started. So that's some really good advice.
Absolutely. And you're spot on. Technology use is changing. We're seeing it more and more. People are adapting to it differently. And so, as caregiving goes and as it evolves, so should the technology that supports it.
Right. Well, I mean, I tell people I used to work and in a situation where we had multi-generational things going on, and a lot of times the staff would say, oh, that the older people aren't going to want to scan a QR code, or they're not going to want. And it's like, well, I mean, in their defense, they've already had to learn like every technology
When you think about
since
what
the
their future,
1950s. Yeah.
yes, it's a lot. That's a lot of change in one lifetime.
Right, right. And so, but my 99-year-old grandmother still texts me. So, I feel like, she's learned tech, but she's had to learn a lot of stuff. So if she didn't want to, I'd cut her some slack.
Yeah, but the minute she learns I can use this to communicate and reach my granddaughter or do
Yeah,
things differently, they're on board.
right. Exactly. Exactly. There are so many different things that we could talk about with Caily, but I think we've given people a good idea, a good overview of what it does, how it helps, and ways to get started. Is there any other thing that you'd like to share with our audience of caregivers? Most of the people listening are giving care, or they are uh, in that pre-caregiving phase where they've just been home for the holidays. They see their loved ones are starting to, they're like, oh, things are changing. They know that caregiving is coming. Is there any other thing you'd like to share with them today?
I think there's a couple things that I've learned since becoming so immersed in the care community. And one of them is if you're a working caregiver, talk to your HR department. Businesses and
Mm.
companies are becoming so much more open to working caregivers, and they're providing a lot of resources that maybe didn't exist 5, 6, 10 years ago. The more I become involved in the community, we've run into some really cool companies that are helping to add benefits for caregivers in the workplace, which is really, really provides a lot of hope that things are
Yeah.
changing and support for
Yes.
caregivers is out there. And it's becoming more and more acceptable to say, I'm a caregiver and I need support. And I think that's really important. Communicate about it. I think a lot of times it was hard to say, I'm a caregiver and I need support. And when you say, listen, here's what's going on, I need help, I think everybody wants to help. They just don't always know how to help. And I think one of the hardest things is being a caregiver is knowing how people can help you or what that looks like. And so day to day, really just saying, this might seem small, but I could use help, at the grocery store or doctor's appointment, whatever it is, don't be afraid to ask your circle because they truly do want to help. They just need a little guidance sometimes. And so I found that the more I reached out and the more I reached out with specifics, the more help I was able to get when I was caregiving. And that's not easy. That's not easy at all, which is part of why we have the ask for help feature because you never know when something's going to come to you. But when you stay silent, it eats you up.
Yeah. So tell me more about the ask for help feature. Tell
Yeah.
me
So
about
that
that.
Yeah, the ask for help feature is you can go into the app, you could hit a button, say ask for help, and you could say, I need help with getting grandma to an appointment today, or I'm setting this up for mom, or whatever it might be. And your entire care circle can see it and they could say, I got this. And it goes right onto their calendar and they can say no problem. And it can take the burden off of asking that one person again and again and again, or feeling like you run down the list. You just
Yeah. You have to text everybody or make a phone call and be like, hey,
Yes, and you feel bad and this one person is so giving and caring, but I'm asking them again. And so this allows whoever's available to just say, I got this, I got you. That's really important. Because you kind of want to do it all on your own and
yeah.
it wears on you.
Yeah. That is a great feature. I love that. Again, like you mentioned, if I had had Kaylee when I was caring for my mom, that would have probably been the one I used the most because I never knew, like every day was a different day. So like what I needed wasn't always the same. So it was really hard to have a person that just did the thing. Although I did, she did have a really good friend that did her grocery shopping for her, which was, and she set that up on her own with her friend, and so that continued all the way till she was in the nursing home. So that was really helpful. But there were other things that just every day was different. Like I didn't never know. And then I think sometimes too, it's okay to click that button for support, even if it's something I need.
Yeah.
Like, you
Yes,
know,
it would be for you. And I really love all the tools that are coming out to support caregivers, not just logistically like this, but also emotionally. There's a
mhm.
lot happening in the care tech space right now, a lot of different support tools that unlike anything we've seen before. It's exciting to watch what's happening out there.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to be talking about on the podcast this year. Is just all the different tools that are coming out that are designed to help caregivers with communication and connection, with emotional support, and then that the more intensive care with uh, what is the term I want to use? Not surveillance. That sounds weird.
But I know exactly what you're talking about. There are a lot of care surveillance apps out there right now, and
Yeah,
looking which
right.
ones were safe and good is really important.
Yeah, so that we're going to be talking through all of that this year, but I really appreciate your time today, Winter. This has been wonderful. Like I said, when I came across Caily, I was like, in heaven. It's also beautiful, by the way. The app
Thank
is
you.
itself is beautiful. So I love that from a tech perspective. I love that. It's easy to use, user friendly, all of those things. And I really encourage everybody to take a look at it. Of course, I will drop Winter your website and then ways that people can learn more about Caily in the show notes. Is there anything else you want to tell them before we sign off for today?
No, just thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And thank you for joining me today on the From Guilt to Good podcast. To access additional caregiver resources, learn more about Caily, and support our show, or connect with us on social, you can check the show notes. We're changing the conversation around caregiving one episode at a time.